Hello and welcome to Not Just Ads. Those who know me know that I am often critical about some stances and some approaches of media owners. And that's not because I'm against them, but because I know their potential and I really think they have a huge opportunity in the digital advertising and media ecosystems. That's also why I'm getting very excited when I see cool approaches, great strategies. And that's why when a few weeks ago, Immediate Media launched PRISM, their first party data solution, I thought we must talk about it at Not Just Ads. That's why we have today Matthew Rance, head of commercial data and analytics at Immediate Media. Welcome, Matt.
Great. Well, yeah, thanks for having me. It's brilliant to be here. You've had some superb guests so far, so I'm privileged to finally join you.
Well, I keep the tradition going with you. But let's put things into context for those that are not from the UK. What is Immediate Media?
Immediate was founded way back in 2011. Actually, is the result of a merger of several media brands and the acquisition of an asset from BBC Worldwide, actually, which at the time had a hugely successful magazine business, of course. And I would say over the last 15 years, we've really built on this publishing strength and extended our, I suppose, expert editorial voice across digital, audio, events, video, and social. Um, Now, as a premium publisher, our brands really focus on bringing joy, right? Now, actually, that essence, that message of bringing joy is really our central purpose as an organization and helping people enjoy their passions every day. So we really do this through our market leading brands across food, entertainment, motors, gardening, parenting, and I think we reach now around 19 million users every day. Um, and we are now truly a digital first business, not due to just the distribution of our content, but also the revenue that we make. And I would say Immediate takes a great deal of pride in having highly engaged audiences, but crucially in very brand safe, positive environments that also prove to be of huge value to our advertising partners as well.
Don't poke me with the topic of brand safety because you
Yeah, I
know
put it
that I'm
out there.
very passionate about that. But what is Prism? You are focusing on commercial data and analytics, so that's your field, your baby.
Yeah, so Prism, and I know we're going to come on to this in a bit more detail, so I'll try and explain it at a very high level. Prism is an acronym because our industry loves an acronym or a cliche or a soundbite, so we thought we'd lean into that. Um, but at the broadest possible level, Prism is our new commercial data product, which incorporates, I would say, a much more extensive, all-encompassing definition of first-party data, right? That really leverages every unique data asset and capability as well that we have as an organization. Um, and if I just take a step back and explain kind of how we got there without going into any of the detail of Prism, when we were thinking about this, and not to frame this in hopefully too glibber of a way, we came to the realization, which was ultimately the realization that served as the building blocks of Prism, that if you consider the single most important thing to us as an organization, so just kind of forget ads, right? Just as an organization, the most important thing
We
to us,
must forget ads. We
yeah,
must forget
it's not
ads.
just ads,
That's
right?
also why it is exactly. It's the future for media brands, a holistic approach.
Right. And this is the thing is if you just take a step back, and I'm not saying anything kind of, revolutionary here, but really we had this realization that the single most important thing to our organization can be boiled down to understanding the audience, right? That's really where it all begins. From the content that we write, the products that we build, the features that we build, of course, the ads that we serve, all of that stuff begins with understanding the audience. And we really feel like that's been absolutely, or yeah, really at kind of the heart of all of the success that we've had to date. But then if you consider what the central, most important thing to an advertiser is, it's precisely the same thing, albeit from a slightly different perspective. But whenever a brand has a new product, a new service, they're trying to do precisely the same thing. It all starts with, who are my audience? Who am I trying to reach? Who's going to be interested in this product or this service? In what channels should I market to them? What do I currently understand about them? What else do I need to obtain? What else do I need to learn about them? Where would I get that from? And so it's the two exact same things that we ultimately face in terms of challenges and ways in which we approach it. Um, and Prism is essentially an acknowledgement of that, right? It's about saying, well, we've been able to do this for so many years. This has been central to our success, this concept of understanding the audience, using all of the data and the capabilities and the resources that we have there. So why shouldn't we be approaching it in exactly the same way for our advertisers, with a much broader definition of first party data?
You anticipated it and mentioned it already. Is more than just first party data, data points. Is about people. Is about bringing to life your audiences. And one question that maybe is not related to Prism, but is related more to your data strategy. Do you also, besides understanding the audience, looking at what the audience is doing, do you also engage with the audience, listen to the audience and what the audience is telling you?
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely. So
talking, thinking about surveys, I'm talking about feedback loops.
yeah, absolutely. So a core part of Prism is the research pillar, right? And that's comprised of lots of different things. But one of the biggest parts of that is about asking our users, our large panel that we built up over many years, how they feel about things that relate to our sites, our magazines, our properties, our platforms, and also just how they feel about the world more broadly. How are their attitudes changing? How are their habits changing? Perceptions and things like that. And that's absolutely crucial. So that it isn't just, a shallow level view, if you like, of web metrics, behavior on site and things like that. That's obviously incredibly important, vital for so many use cases. But you really have to have a much broader um, view, if you like, of the customer that isn't just a siloed, first party data is audience data on site. No, actually, it's something that's much broader than that. It needs to really be much more ambitious.
This is great, and I'm digressing as usual, but I find so often the situation when a media owner has got a certain perception of their audience, and then you run a survey, in-depth
Mm,
survey, and you find out that actually that was a perception, reality is different. That's
mm.
that's why I like that. But
Oh, by the way, the
your
other
data
reason
strategy.
I was going to say, by the way, the other reason why both, survey-based data, if you like, pure research-based data, and, for example, web-based data is both so important is because we know that what people say and what people do are often diametrically opposed. Both are equally important. But what I say to you is often very different from how I behave online. So, you've really got to look at both. That they're both incredibly important.
How did you get there? Uh, because a lot of people in the audience are media owners, and it would be great to hear what your journey has been.
I think just to almost address one point before we delve into immediate data strategy, and this relates to a bit of a kind of bugbear of mine actually, that relates to our industry, and it's the incorrect use of the word strategy actually, because often what I find is we talk a lot now, quite rightly. I mean, we're doing it on this podcast. increasingly so, on trade press and things like that around data strategy. It's incredibly important. I mean, it's never been more important. But often we misuse the word. You'll hear people say things like, well, our data strategy is to, integrate, the top five ID partners in the next 6 months to get, £500,000 incremental revenue. I mean, let's be clear, that's not a strategy. Um, that's a tactic at best. And you need a strategy first before you can think about your tactics. I mean, this seems like a facile point, but it's really important that we're clear first, I think, as publishers, as practitioners on actually what a strategy is. So you can forget your tactics first, like park them for one moment. I mean, like park your strategy at first, because your strategy is your plan, right? And what do you need in order to have a plan? Well, first you need a vision and a mission. I mean, this stuff, it might seem a bit whimsical, but it's really important. You need to have an idea, right, of like where is it that you're actually heading long term, right? That's your vision. Now, your vision can be like a specific data one. It's great if it can be, to be honest with you. More broadly, it can just be the company wide vision. But if you can have one that relates to, your data, commercial data efforts, to be, for example, the leading automotive media platform that empowers brands and advertisers with, precision targeting and data driven insights, blah blah blah. The vision is really your ideal future state. Where do you want to get to when you think about your data as a publisher? Where are you 5 years from now or 2 years from now? Whatever it is that kind of suits you. um, then you can have your mission.
What is essential, I think, is also that the strategy is the strategy of the different areas of the business are all consistently aligned to the overall company strategy and overarching objectives. And that sounds straightforward and sounds obvious, but it's not the case. I think this is probably the weakest point in media companies today
Mm.
for what I see. And thank you for this underlining the importance and the meaning of the word strategy. I always love when I don't have to sound like a broken record and someone else is reinforcing the concept. So, your data strategy.
Yes. So to answer your actual question, so we probably best to start back in 2017. Actually, that's when it kind of properly began for us. We back then we had a DMP, we had a data management platform. We were segmenting some of our data. We were selling that data in the form of targeted audience campaigns. But we certainly had no strategy in place. We were just doing precisely what I said. The technology was suboptimal, and actually we weren't selling anything that was unique about our brands. We were actually, in fact, selling the tech. I won't mention the specific name of the technology; it would perhaps be a bit unfair, but our salespeople would literally sell the name of the tech. They would say, "I've sold a DMP ABC." And
Such a classic.
yeah, and we knew that wasn't right. It's anyone could do that. It was not in any way leveraging what was unique to us. The power of our brands, the content, the data that we had. The highly engaged audiences and everything else. But it was a start, and it was fairly popular. Albeit from a revenue perspective, it was kind of a nice to have, I would say. It wasn't really driving the bottom line. However, as far back as 2017, I would say that we had a pretty clear sense, and this is a bit of a strange thing to be saying now because this is like 7 years ago, but we had a pretty clear indication of where we felt the industry was heading, with respect to privacy and, even regulation. And we made an investment in moving over to Permitive, which I think we were certainly one of the first. I think we were possibly the second UK publisher at the time. And it was a very new, innovative technology, and it gave us a very unique story in market. But not only did we have a new technology that was using on device, running on the edge, and enabled us to lean into what we thought was a really important message around the future of our industry and the importance of privacy and the challenges that we were facing around identity, even way back then, around addressability and things like that. But we thought, hang on a minute, there's more we can do here. Like we can do a good job just thinking about how we brand this, because we can sell the tech, but really, everyone will catch up, and then we'll just be doing the same thing as we've always done. And so we thought very carefully around how do we properly productize what we have here. And that was the creation, I think, in 2018 of IM audiences, which really involved the proper branding of what we could do around segmentation, targeting, insights using first party data, extensive training, creation of kind of sales collateral for our teams, various PR awards that we won. That was the real inception of our kind of proper first party commercial offering. That's really where it all began for us.
Yes, I remember it. It was like almost taking a step up in sophistication and in general in the industry. I'm saying I remember it because it was moving from having a tag on the page, collecting this data, having these segments, and pushing them into using them on campaigns, and from actually going much deeper and becoming much more unique in the offering.
Yeah, for sure. It gave us a really unique voice in market. What I will say, it's really important to mention that in some ways we were too early. I think we went really hard back in 2017 around the message around the importance of privacy and third party cookies and the challenges that we thought our advertisers were facing. And you can appreciate now, given 2024, how often indifferent the faces were that we were met with in certain meeting rooms. People just didn't buy it, didn't understand it. We've seen that even this year, right? There's still a general feeling amongst some people that it will kind of be okay. The industry will.
Please keep thinking ahead. That's what's missing in media brands in general. It's being reactive versus being proactive, and the whole category is paying the price. So yes, I'm a big fan of media companies that think ahead.
Sure. So from 2018 really onwards, we continued to build on that success. It became, I would say, went from a real nice to have part of our digital business to a really important revenue driver, right? It was a really crucial part of our campaigns, of our sales story. So much of the digital activity that we sold was using data, either data targeted campaigns and or campaigns, brief stage, post campaign, in which we were going back with extensive materials, collateral, using the first party data we had from IM audiences. And it was really successful. It was a real central part of, kind of one of the bits that was unique to us from a sales perspective. And that was great. But we kind of got to the point, I would say, we recognized in the last year or so that, frankly, we haven't innovated significantly for quite a while. And it's a really important point. What we launched back in 2018 has improved in lots of ways, and there's been lots of new features and additions, but hasn't dramatically changed, hasn't dramatically evolved from what we had back then. And that was the first thing. And I think the second point is that we really feel that publishers in some ways are at a bit of an inflection point now. I sometimes think about this because, our landscape in some ways is becoming, I think we'll all agree, actually, increasingly more complex, right? The digital world is really hard to actually keep up with, especially more recently with the introduction of AI and the transformation that's set to take place in so many ways. So, the platforms, the way that we use and kind of understand the internet. But when we think about publishing and when we think about data, I think there's almost a bit of a paradox taking shape now. And what I mean by that, if I can just elaborate, is that we know now that first party data is really the most valuable asset that any advertising company can have. Certainly, any publisher. And guess what? Like what's something that publishers have in abundance? It's first party data. So that's great, right? That's absolutely brilliant. We are really in control of kind of where the value is when we look to the future. So that's a brilliant thing. On the other hand, and this is where the kind of paradox is, I think. I really feel as though there's kind of macro forces at the moment that are coming in, set to come in, that are creating, in some ways, a huge squeeze and perhaps scarcity on the first party data that publishers have. So, what I mean by that is that, we're all familiar with the increasingly strict browser measures that are being introduced. The tighter regulation, first across kind of mainland Europe, now in the UK and other parts of the world too. That's manifesting into things like rejectall on the first layer. There's greater scrutiny as well on precisely what processing of data can be done without consent. Talk of centralizing cookie consent controls like at the browser level, for example. Um, and search generative models, right? This is another thing which potentially is all about moving audience attention away, possibly from publishers like us, into other environments. And all of this potentially is creating a squeeze on the first party data that we have. So there is a bit of a paradox, I think, at the moment that we might see play out in which first party data is unquestionably becoming more important and more valuable. And that's brilliant. But it is getting squeezed, I think, or will get squeezed in some areas for publishers. Now, what does that mean? Because I don't think this is, it's not a bad thing. It will create scarcity, but what that means is it will increase the value, really, like just sort of see simple economics. But it will mean, as publishers, I think we have to get much more industrious, much more creative, much more strategic with the ways in which we use that data. And the way in which we
I
kind of
agree.
derive value from it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that this is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity because it will be an advantage for those media companies that will be able to develop a tighter relationship with the audience, with the individual user or subscriber, and generate that trust that will mean that there will be still this data exchange, but also the data and value exchange. But also, I think that it's crucial that media owners, for the reason you mentioned, will not do what the industry was used to in the past, which is decoupling the assets. Data is as a standalone asset is not as valuable for media companies as the overall proposition. It's about the environment, the engagement, the user experience, the content, and the data.
And really, so it's with that in mind that Prism is a recognition of that fact. It goes back to that point about it being a redefinition of the first party data that we had. So a shift, if you like, from the definition we had prior, which was really, audience is about behavioral data primarily alone. Kind of on-site segmentation for targeting, for insights. But that's really great, and it's been so important, so valuable to us for a very long time. But moving to a definition in which, hang on, we have so much other stuff, so many other data assets and resources and capabilities, and actually that's what Prism is about, and that's going to be really important, frankly, for our survival in the future, but certainly also for us to thrive as well.
And you mentioned it is an acronym, right?
Yes, yeah, it is inevitably we thought we would create an acronym. And so it's yeah comprised of obviously 5 words. Planning, and so planning really relates to helping our advertisers understand their audience. So using our various first party data um, to help them understand who their audience are, where they're likely to find them, maybe refining that audience further. The best places to be reaching them. Um, not just across our properties, but other environments as well.
What are environments?
Well, what I mean by that is precisely, we'll give them insight across not just the best places and other information that relates to our properties, but expand on that in terms of like how are their behaviors, how are their attitudes, what are the trends that relate to behavior offsite, other environments that even those that we don't necessarily own, but that tap into the direct relationship we have with our audience, right? Or almost kind of serving a little bit as a kind of research arm, but given the data and given the expertise that we have.
Well, research. That's the second letter,
Yeah,
right?
which leads us very nicely onto research, and so with research, the way in which we frame this pillar is this really relates to all of the ultimately the tools, right, that we have at our disposal when it comes to research. So, the creation of surveys that we can deploy in a range of different ways across our sites and other platforms. The writing of the surveys, the answering of briefs, the expertise that's there. We have so many different tools, so many different ways in which we can conduct research in lots of different ways, and that's really what underpins that pillar. um, and that third pillar, insight, is very much kind of inextricably linked with research. And that's because we really feel as though there's no point having research if you don't have insight, because what insight's really about is the way in which once you've conducted the research, you're then leveraging ultimately the expertise that you have or we have as an organization to bring that data, to bring that research to life, right? So you can kind of think about research and insight as resource and capabilities. We've got in research, we've got extensive resources at our disposal through the tech, through the kind of inventory, just through the sheer size that we have there. But from an insights perspective, we have market leading capabilities to provide cutting edge insight to our clients around market trends, editorial trends, national population level as well. Real kind of thought leadership stuff. And often when we think about insight, this is irrespective of what an advertiser might request from us. This is the stuff that we might often do because we think it's incredibly valuable to the ecosystem or to a broad set of advertisers. So, a large piece of research and insight we'll conduct on the travel sector or, consumers' habits around food. How are they changing? What did they look like last year? What are they telling us now? And how are they set to change next year? And marrying that up again goes back to our previous point with how that behavior is changing perhaps on site. That's really the kind of the synergy, if you like, between those two pillars, which of course also bleeds into planning as well. um, we then have segmentation. So segmentation, as you can probably imagine, is a really relates to the segmentation of our data, of our audiences. It's very extensive. Actually, there's a broad range of ways in which we can segment our users now, from the very traditional methods, if you like, of straight up behavioral segmentation, then modeling that data. We have various kind of more custom approaches using zero party data in which we ask users questions. We then take that data, we tend to model it, broaden it, and then create that as a segment we can either target for our clients, and or provide insights to them on as well.
That's a peak of what I call the funnel of trust. So
Mm.
getting to a level of a trust of engagement where the value exchange means you can ask questions to your audience, you can gain deeper, better insights.
Absolutely, yeah. But I mean, that's such a crucial part. By the way, another thing, perhaps for some people counterintuitively that we include in segmentation now is contextual. I think sometimes in our industry, historically at least, contextual is kind of framed as the total opposite of audience or data. It's like people often ask, like, "Oh, is it contextual or is it audience?" I would say if you're doing contextual properly in 2024, then it really should be viewed as kind of the same thing as contextual solutions in 2024 are data propositions. Let's be clear on that. When we move away from traditional keyword methodologies, we're talking about products that ingest data, vast volumes of data, put it into a model, and then make predictions using that model on what they think the content is about, right? And that's our approach. That's what our contextual solution uses, and that's a data product.
I don't have an applause button, but consider it pressed.
Um, so yeah, that's so segmentation is in some ways a very straightforward pillar. It's very obvious what it is, but it's very extensive. There's a broad range of ways in which we can segment our data and offer the ability to target or also just provide insights based on those segmentations to our clients. The
I have a
final,
question regarding
yeah.
segmentation.
Mm.
Um, do you work on with the data within, you mentioned permutive, do you segment within permutive, or do you work on different tools outside, combine different data sources, and then ingest it back into permutive?
So somewhere in between, we do a bit of both, and our ambition is, and important to mention, Prism is an iterative, ongoing project. We've got something really compelling that we're really happy with right now, but we recognise there's a really exciting and extensive roadmap in place for at least the next 6 to 12 months. But a big part of that is to progressively bring more and more of the first party data we have into one central place. I think if we consider maybe common themes or attributes of great data propositions, recognize all publishers are different, right? But that's probably going to be one, to try and have the ambition of bringing as much of the various data sources, systems that you've got to collect data into one central place. That can be wherever. It doesn't have to be your DMP. It kind of makes sense if it is, because that's often the place that you kind of activate the data. But it could be your data warehouse. It might be some other system that you find it very useful to get that data into. So we do quite a lot of that now. We try and bring more and more of the data that we collect outside of permitive into it, so that we join more of it up together, because that's so important. Lots of publishers face a bit of a challenge in which they have maybe two or three different technologies that hold very different data sets. And so I think it can be incredibly jarring for advertisers when you're unable to tell them, maybe web-based insights on demographic segments. And the reality is those two systems just don't talk. And so the ambition should certainly be to try and bring them together. Advertisers don't care about the tech you use or the challenges you face. They just want the data and the insights that they're requesting. And so, we need to try and accommodate for that, I think. Finishing then with measurement. So if Prism starts with planning, which is all about, the kind of brief stage or even the pre-brief stage, we want to try and get there to help clients understand their audience perhaps before they've even created a brief. Then Prism ends with measurement, and measurement is all about that kind of post-campaign qualification, validation, if you like, of whether the inventory, whether the activity they ran with us was a success. And of course, there's such a broad range of ways in which we can validate that success with them, depending on their needs. So, brand lift studies, sales uplift. We're looking at, attention-based reporting, other, kind of interesting angles around kind of validating the inventory we've delivered in specific audiences. Kind of verified audience reach, I think is interesting to a lot of our clients as well. But that's really what measurement is about, is kind of proving the success of a campaign. And we know that is incredibly important to advertisers. That kind of goes without saying, and that's why it's a standalone pillar.
I love the approach. The end-to-end approach is the full data life cycle, starting from planning, ending with measurement. And how is it being received? You have done a great initiative, which is a roadshow, visiting agencies and clients. Was it received?
So it's been received incredibly well, actually, far better than I could have hoped, which has been brilliant. And also just internally, by our sales team, which goes without saying, this is so important, right? We've learnt the hard way from this. It's one thing to have what you think is a great product or great tech, but it is worthless if you don't get sales buy-in and sales adoption. They are the engine room, if you like, for getting that stuff out there and for selling it, obviously. And so the adoption that we've and reception we've received has been really positive. We are, however, ambitious, and we know there's a lot more we want to do. In the shorter term, in the form of more case studies proving the kind of the success of the stuff we can do right now, in Prism, but also when we just look to next year, I mean, there's so much more that we want to do around new integrations, new uses of the data, and just kind of new capabilities. So it really feels like the work has kind of starts now, to be honest with you.
Matt, this is the episode when I realize I really need an applause button because you highlighted another crucial element, fundamental, which is the communication of the value. One thing is knowing about your value. Another thing is making everybody aware and make it a part of what they buy because they understand its depth and its effectiveness.
This is so terribly cliche, but I think it's worth bearing in mind that Steve Jobs, often sort of always known as one of the greatest technologists out there, right? Inventors, but I think above all else, he was just an outstanding marketer, right? And always something that he said, very simply, which is that the most powerful person in the room was the storyteller. It was clearly something that he just understood so well, that incredible products. I mean, I know this can be a bit of a polarizing opinion, but broadly, Apple, great products, but he understood that the messaging that you delivered around that was the most important thing. There's another quote from Rory Sutherland, who lots of people may have heard of, and he says, "What is it now? I think it's we don't value things; we value their meaning. What they are is defined by the laws of physics. How they make us feel is defined by the laws of psychology, something like that." But the important point is, it's really just the power of storytelling, the power of messaging, of narrative. And that, if I can tie it back to data propositions, because there's always a way to tie anything back to data, you do not underestimate the power of having a clear story, a clear narrative. Don't focus only on great tech, on integrations, on, all-encompassing solutions. Really, you have to spend time thinking about what's the message here, like what are we trying to say in market. There's the Amazon approach, like anecdote around kind of almost starting with your awards entry or your PR. It's something we often do, in a sense of we often create the collateral, we create the decks for the stuff that doesn't exist yet, because it's a really useful way of understanding what would this look like in an ideal world? Like, what would we have? What would we sell? Or what would I take to the sales team? Right? What would I show them on a Monday morning in the training session to say, look, we've got this new feature and this is what it looks like and this is how it works. Because when you're clear on that, everything else is so much easier. Then I can go and approach tech companies and say, this is what I want. This is what I'm thinking. How could you fit in? That's a much easier way to approach it, rather than thinking, right, what's the tech I need and how do I then retrofit my story around it?
So, Matt, you asked what's the message here, and your message today has been very powerful, and I'm sure very useful for all the media owners listening. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you again for having me. It's been so great to join you and yeah, to finally have a good, thorough chat about all things data and otherwise.